From a wealthy third generation to an ancient poor boy, Jingshen lost his motivation to strive until one day he discovered that his CEO's wife was also wearing in their past lives. From love at first sight to resentment, they spent 10 years proving that love alone is not enough in marriage. In this life, from being like water and fire to dispelling past grievances, can they prove that as long as there is love, marriage can still continue. Keywords of the novel. Mo Yanliang with no pop-ups. Download the complete collection of Mo Yanliang TXT, and read the latest chapters of Mo Yanliang. Chapter 1. Is her, it's really her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 is her, it's really her. This is already the third day waiting for ransom. Bloody smell, sweaty smell, tobacco smell, leather smell, gunpowder smell, feces and urine smell. The stuffy room was filled with all kinds of nauseating smells, and the already numbing summer cool had no strength to vomit. She didn't know how big this place was or how many people were being held, but she could clearly feel the smell of death spreading rapidly. The kidnappers outside the door were as rude and irritable as ever, but she couldn't understand a word or even a single word they said. Yes, she, who has learned 4 foreign languages, can't even understand a single word. Unable to see, move, eat or drink, the possibility of survival is becoming increasingly slim, but she still strives to persevere. Dad is old, Ali is still young, and Jingshen, who is on the brink of death, they all need her. She must go out alive. The door was suddenly kicked open and a group of people rushed in. As soon as Xia Yueliang caught a whiff of fresh air, those people started shooting without saying a word. Hot blood and flesh splattered onto her face and body, and the people around her who were kidnapped like her quickly lost their anger. The gunfire stopped, and Xia Yueliang, who was not shot, stopped breathing, just like she was dead. "Madam, I'm really sorry," a man in leather boots walked up to her and said in somewhat stiff English. Xia Yueliang's body shook violently and finally regained consciousness. She shouted in a hoarse voice, "Just ask how much money you want. My child is still young, my father is old and not in good health. My husband's life and death are uncertain in the hospital, and I cannot die." The man was not moved at all and pressed his pistol against her forehead. "Madam, all of these people combined are not as valuable as one of your fingers. The ransom is already on the way, but we don't have time anymore. A dignified person should have a dignified way of dying. Good luck to you. Girl, girl." After a burst of shouting and slapping, the girl with a pale face and a cold body finally opened her eyes. What caught the eye were the anxious Yanliang and the blue sky above her head. The girl grabbed Yanliang's hand tightly and struggled to sit up. The shimmering falling star lake, the exquisite and unique half-pond villa, the graceful lotus flowers, the ripples left by waterfowl on the lake, the warm sunshine on her body, and the boatman who accompanied her on a lake tour early this morning. Everything was so real, it turned out she had another nightmare. No, this is not a dream, but her past life. A shot in the head ended her 32-year-old life. With the kidnappers' auspicious words, she, as a dignified person, successfully traveled to a respectable family. Today, she is the youngest granddaughter of the Grand Tutor of Fenghua, Xia Ningzi. Although she has had various hardships for over a decade, it has been a life she never dared to dream of in her past life. Sister Liang, the little boy who was clinging to the side of the ship, timidly called out. Xia Yueliang realized that she had overlooked this little guy. "Xiaoyi, come up quickly." She waved at the little boy. Xiaoyi quickly climbed onto the boat and squatted down beside Xia Yueliang. He is only 5 years old this year, and Yanliang has only been working at the mountain villa for 3 or 4 years. Neither of them has ever seen Xia Yueliang like this before. They were really scared just now. Seeing that her complexion had almost returned to normal, Yanliang breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Miss, on a hot day, your hands are cold and cold. Are you sick?" Xiaoyi loudly argued, "Sister Liang had a nightmare, she's not sick." Xia Yueliang said to him in a warm voice, "Did sister scare you just now?" Xiaoyi nodded forcefully and said, even the water birds were scared away. Xia Yuliang instructed Yanliang, Xiaoyi's clothes are soaked through. Let's go back quickly. Yes, Yanliang stood up and walked towards the stern of the ship. As soon as she paddled 4 or 5 oars, she shouted, Miss, look. Steward Wei has returned. So fast. Xia Yuliang stood up and took 2 steps forward, looking up towards the villa. At the end of the long corridor by the lake, Wei Jian, the head of the villa, turned his back to them and was talking to more than 10 black-clothed people in 2 rows. Xiaoyi leaned over and tugged at her sleeve. Xia Yuliang lowered her eyes and looked at him, what's wrong? Sister Liang, Xiaozi is stealing food behind our backs. Xiaoyi raised her hand and pointed to the other end of the corridor. Xia Yuliang pinched his chubby bun face and said, what's your little brain thinking all day? You're not here, your sister can't even eat anything. Xiaoyi quietly spat out her tongue, and Sister Liang can curse again. It's really nice, but the ship's mother said again, Miss, these many new guards have been added to the villa. From now on, 4th Master doesn't have to worry about you. Xia Yuliang didn't take it seriously and said, there wasn't much to worry about originally. Dad is really worried too much. The boatman bent her lips and exerted some more force on her hands. The 4th Master only has such a precious daughter, worrying is necessary. Moreover, the girl's recent appearance is really worrying. Almost simultaneously, Xiaozi also saw them. She quickly ran towards the other end of the corridor. The people in black are all teenagers, and Wei Jianzheng, the chief steward, is giving them a lecture. You have all learned the basic rules before. If you want to establish yourself in this villa, the first thing to remember is to speak less and do more. Uncle Wei, Sister Liang's boat has returned. Xiao Xi ran to Wei Jian's side and looked up at him with a small face. Wei Jian's voice abruptly stopped, and the cold and stern facial lines instantly added a touch of softness. He turned around and took a few steps, only to see that the small boat was still some distance away from the shore, but he could already see the face of the young girl at the bow of the boat. Let's go and welcome the girl, Wei Jian waved and walked towards the lake with a smile. Did you just leave them behind like this? The teenagers looked at each other and had been in contact with the steward Wei for 3 or 4 days. They had never seen a smile on his face before. I never expected him to have such a warm side. Even if interrupted by a little girl, she didn't get angry. Her coffin-like face could turn into a flower in the blink of an eye, and she looked very kind. The teenagers became increasingly curious about the owner of this villa. They didn't dare to break the rules and follow over to see what was going on, but they were still too young and not steady enough, and couldn't help but let out a buzzing discussion. Only Yan Jingshen, who stood at the end of the second row, remained silent and his expression was somewhat strange. Banqi Villa, the girl's surnamed Xia. These may still be explained by coincidence. But the layout and architectural style of this place were all that the woman liked, and the pickled pepper chicken feet that the little girl had just nibbled on. What surprised him even more was the sound of Sister Liang. If it's really just a coincidence, everything is easy to say. If it were really her, myself. Yan Jingshen clenched his fists tightly, trying to suppress the urge to run to the lake to explore the truth. Senior brother Jing, what's wrong with you? Wen Ziqiao beside him felt something was wrong and turned his head to look at him. Yan Jingshen released his fist and tried to squeeze out a smile, saying, I'm fine. It's strange when there's nothing. Su Jun also leaned over and said, Senior brother Jing likes to talk and laugh the most on weekdays, but since he came to Banqi Mountain Villa, he has become a sullen gourd. I've been strange for a long time. That's it. When Ziqiao reached out and grabbed Yan Jingshen's shoulder, chuckling, shouldn't senior brother Jing be scared by that coffin face? At this moment, Yan Jingshen has no mood to joke with his junior brothers, and it is even more impossible to share his thoughts with them. He pressed his abdomen and said, I had a bad stomach last night and felt a bit uncomfortable. Although Wen Ziqiao and Su Jun were young and innocent, they were not easy to fool. The meals for several consecutive days were very light, and even if senior brother Jing lied, he wouldn't bring such food. Jingshen still wanted to distinguish, but suddenly the surroundings returned to silence. The three of them couldn't say much, so they quickly stood up with the other teenagers hanging hands. Xia Yuelyang got off the boat with a small intention, chatted with Wei Jian for a few words, and then walked into the corridor together. The boys were all surprised, not expecting that the owner of the villa would be such a young and delicate little girl. The green dress without any decoration is like the softest willow in early spring, beautiful and colorful. What's even more surprising is her skin color, so white that one can even overlook her extremely delicate and beautiful features. Jingshen's heart was beating fast as it jumped out of the cavity. It's her, it's really her. With the same age and appearance, except for clothes and hairstyle, the girl in front of her is exactly the same as Xia Yuelyang when she first met the previous generation. But shouldn't she live well and be at the peak of her life? He took a deep breath and quickly regained his composure. The situation has reached this point, and the most taboo is panic. This woman is clever, ruthless, and ruthless. He must not show any flaws or miss the opportunity. Jingshen shrank his shoulders, trying to reduce his presence as much as possible. Unfortunately, he is half a head taller than the other teenagers, and even standing at the end of the team, he is still very prominent. Fenghua is prosperous, and Xiuqing is located in the hinterland. The lives of the people have always been stable, and even the government handles trivial cases. That's why Xia Yuelyang felt that the existing guards in the villa were sufficient and there was no need to add new members. But since everyone has already arrived, she must personally inspect it, which was a habit developed many years ago. Wei Jian was well aware of the young master's temperament and led her to the young men. If the girl thinks it's suitable, she can stay. If it's not suitable, I'll go and choose. Xia Yuelyang looked up at the first young man in the front row. Looking at those bright autumn-like eyes, Jingshen's confidence suddenly dissipated by more than half. In terms of eloquence and cunning, he is far inferior to this woman. Moreover, he still wore this face, and his idea of fooling her was too naive. So with one's own skills, there should still be enough time to escape now, right? Jin Xiu returns to stir up the spring breeze, attracting the phoenix as the queen, Mo Yanliang. Author June has finally rolled back with a new article in a smooth manner. The style remains the same, the joy remains the same, and I hope your support also remains the same. Little buddies need to be taken care of, so let's collect, recommend, and invest all the time. We will never disappoint you, love you, cute mud. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Is him, it's actually him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 is him, it's actually him. Thinking back, Jingshen dare not escape. The people do not fight against the officials, let alone the powerful Xia family. Wei, the steward, investigated their background and learned that he and Wen Su were from the same school. Just hold on to the two junior brothers, and no one related to him can escape. If relatives are implicated as a result, they will never be able to forgive themselves. Xia Yuelyang observed very carefully, but the speed was not slow, and soon it was the last few people's turn. Wen Ziqiao looked likable, even though he was very nervous in his heart, he still smiled and smiled. Xia Yuelyang, who was originally in a bad mood, curved her lips. She carefully scrutinized it again before shifting her gaze away from his face. Jingshen adjusted his breath and prepared to face the biggest test since regaining his new life. "Miss, take care of yourself," someone suddenly shouted loudly in the distance. Jingshen's fist clenched once again, giving rise to unexpected branches. Whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, Xia Yuelyang followed the sound and saw the servant who was usually responsible for delivering messages running towards them quickly. Wei Jian raised his voice and asked, "Why are you so anxious and flustered?" The servant ran up close and panted, "There's a clang and clang," he just said 2 words when a loud noise came from the direction of the gate, startling everyone. Especially for this messenger, his legs softened and he almost fell. Wei Jian grabbed his arm and said, "What's going on?" Although the servant was frightened, his breath had stabilized slightly compared to before. A woman surnamed Mei brought several people with her to try to break into our villa. The guards stopped her from entering, but they didn't make any sense. The little one guessed that the main gate was. As soon as Xia Yuoyang heard the word Mei, her eyes narrowed. Mei Xinjiang. What exactly is wrong with her? If you don't stay well in the capital and enjoy the glory, go all the way to Xiucheng to provoke yourself. Mississippi. Wei Jian lowered her voice and said, "What is the origin of this person surnamed Mei? Isn't he having a grudge against our family?" Xia Yuoyang is extremely disgusted with Mei Xinjiang, but her situation is really difficult to spread everywhere. I can't even talk about revenge. She probably came to disgust me on purpose. Wei Jian couldn't ask further, so he suggested, "Since that's the case, girl, why don't you avoid first and let me lead someone to negotiate?" Xia Yuoyang thought for a moment and said, "The other party has a large number of people, and Uncle Wei cannot compete with them. As long as they don't harm anyone, then follow the old rules." Wei Jian nodded knowingly and instructed the little siblings beside him, "You two should hurry back and come out when Uncle has sent those people away." After watching the 3 of them leave, he hurriedly rushed to the entrance of the villa with the servant just now, still not even glancing at the eager new guards. The teenagers were slightly injured. The villa owner has already recognized them, but Manager Wei took people to negotiate but left them on the sidelines. It's clear that you didn't treat them like people. For the time being, Jingshen did not feel relaxed, let alone concerned about being overlooked. His gaze followed the slender figure that was gradually fading away, and his heart was filled with mixed flavors. No matter how many lifetimes she has lived, this woman cannot change her habit of being restless. But now that she is only 12 or 13 years old and comes from a prestigious background, what kind of enmity can she form with others? Shouldn't it be robbing men? Right. He almost slapped himself wide. Get a ghost. The man is nothing in her eyes. Halfway through Xia Yuoyang's journey, she met the big maid Chunjua. Seeing that the young master was unharmed, she breathed a clear sigh of relief. "Miss, what was that sound just now?" "It sounded scary." "You come back with me first." Xia Yuoyang took her hand and the 2 of them returned to their place of residence together. "I heard that Mei Xinjiang led someone to break through the gate of the villa, and Chuanzhua was shocked. What a crazy woman. What benefits does offending the Xia family have for her as she is too old to weigh the pros and cons?" Xia Yuoyang didn't want to continue talking about that annoying woman, so she changed her tone and said, "I plan to go to Shuacheng. Has there been any news from Brother Feng?" Chuanzhua restrained his thoughts and quickly asked. "There are some messages, but they are not very useful." Chuanzhua is a smart person, and with just a little thought, she understood the idea of Xia Yuoyang. "I heard that the Wen family proposed marriage to Miss Ji, and you suddenly wanted to go to Shuacheng. Isn't that why?" Going to Shuacheng was not a last-minute initiative. Xia Yuoyang pondered for a moment before continuing. At the beginning of the year, Ji Zhongqing consulted Wen Xiangban. The Wen family wished they could swallow the Ji family alive. "It's only been a few months now and I've been rushing to get married again, which makes people suspicious. The influence of the Wen family is increasing, and if this continues, our Xia family will soon have no place to stand." What the girl said is reasonable, but it has been over 2 months since Brother Feng went to Shuacheng. Brother Feng's martial arts are indeed very good, but his mind is not delicate enough. My grandfather no longer cares about politics, and my father is constantly being watched. Only a young and inconspicuous person like me can handle things the most conveniently. When I go and carefully search through the old fox's lair, I won't be able to find any flaws if I don't believe it. Chuanzhua is a family-born child, and Xia Wen is clear about the grudges between the two families. The girl's words just now were quite light. Once the Wen family gains power, the outcome of the Xia family will not be as simple as not having a foothold. Then I'll go pack my bags now. Wait a moment, Xia Yanliang called out to her. I have some things for you to do. Miss, please give orders. Go to the accounting room to collect 180 taels of silver and send the guards brought back by Uncle Wei today. Do you think things are too coincidental, so you suspect they have a connection with Mei Xinyang? Xia Yuliang is very satisfied with her understanding of spring drinking. Regardless of whether there is any involvement or not, there must be no hidden dangers in the villa. It was not easy for them to come here, and 10 taels of silver will be used as a compensation. Also, take good care of Xiaozi and Xiaoyi, and bring them back to Beijing when the weather cools down. Chuanzhua thought she would go to Shuoqing together, but obviously, she was not in the girl's plan. She intended to try again, but Xia Yuliang urged with a smile, hurry up and go. We can meet no later than Mid-Autumn Festival. Yes, Chuanzhua dared not say much and quickly walked out of the room. Xia Yuliang cleaned up briefly and walked into the inner room to open the mechanism. When Banqi Mountain Villa was first built, Xia Sai had someone dig a secret passage to the outside of the villa. After years of careful design and construction, the secret passage has reached a certain scale. Although it cannot be said that it is well connected, its secrecy and safety are guaranteed. But for Xia Yuliang, the biggest function of this secret passage is to facilitate her to enter and exit freely. Carrying a small lantern, she skillfully arrived at a fork leading to the main passage. As soon as Xia Yuliang stepped on one foot, she immediately felt something unusual. She quickly raised the lantern in her hand a few inches. Not far ahead, the orange light cast a black shadow. Who? She sternly rebuked. The person let out a muffled groan. Xia Yuliang pondered to herself that this person's ability to find this place showed some genuine abilities. But he doesn't seem to have any malice, otherwise it wouldn't be difficult for him to be unaware with his skills. She said calmly, "What is your purpose in hiding here?" Jingshen felt quite uncomfortable in his heart. His appearance is no different from his previous life, and this woman has no reaction at all. It seems that she really didn't care about him for a long time, and didn't even leave a trace in her heart. He wants to slap his mouth again. It's really despicable to even take the initiative to bring someone to your door, even though you don't want to be discovered. Xia Yuliang's patience has been exhausted. She is definitely not a competitor in the tough competition, and there is no need to do so. The plan to go to Shuoqing will have to be postponed. Seeing that she wanted to leave, Jingshen finally spoke up and said, "Mr. Xia, many noble people forget things. The cool summer moon startled me greatly. I haven't heard of this title for over a decade. Have I met a fellow villager? Of course, it's impossible for a tearful scene of family recognition to occur, she's not that foolish yet." "You got the wrong person," her tone remained faint. "Stop pretending, devil's pepper. The cool summer moon only makes my head hum. It's him, it's actually him. Overall, the wealthy third generation is still a strict wife. Let's wave our little hands as we collect and recommend investments." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Comparing two harms to choose the lighter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Comparing two harms to choose the lighter. Moon, coolness, summer, moon. As a person of two generations, Xia Yuliang has heard various titles, but those who call her devil pepper can only speak with depth. Now hearing these three words again, she felt like a dagger deeply stabbed into her chest, so painful that she couldn't breathe. All the efforts made over the past decade to heal the pain have almost turned into nothing at this moment. Seeing her suddenly fragile like a porcelain doll that would shatter at a touch, Jingshen was taken aback. His mind couldn't help but imagine the scene of the first argument between the two. At that time, she was angry, painful, disappointed. But not fragile. In the following years, their relationship became increasingly cold and the number of meetings also decreased. Mr. Xia, who acted decisively with ruthless methods, achieved great success in both fame and fortune, and had nothing to do with being fragile. What kind of mishap did she encounter, to the point where her temperament changed so much that she didn't even hide it in front of him? Jingshen knew that Xia Yuliang didn't care about him at all, and he didn't expect to continue any old relationships with her in this lifetime. But just as he had found this secret passage uncontrollably before, he took a few steps forward by a stroke of luck. As he approached, Xia Yuliang finally saw his appearance clearly. Originally, Jingshen not only traveled through this unfamiliar time and space like her, but also preserved the appearance of the previous life. However, he is still young and appears somewhat immature, with a completely different hairstyle and attire from his previous life. Without careful examination, he really can't recognize him. No wonder I didn't notice his presence among a group of black-clad teenagers just now. Realizing that Xia Yuliang didn't seem to reject him, Jingshen asked, Liang, have you encountered something? His eyes were filled with concern, not even realizing how soft his tone was. Unfortunately, Xia Yuliang's gaze had already moved away from his face, and how could the conflict between them be so easily resolved? A hint of mockery curved around the corner of her mouth. Jingshen clearly wanted to ask her how she died in her previous life. After all, how could it be possible to travel through time without dying alone? But why should I tell him? She said in a colder tone than before, whatever happens has nothing to do with you. Also, don't call me so cheesy, I'm not familiar with you. Jingshen choked, this woman's bad temper has not changed at all. He was the one who couldn't return home in his previous life, and he was the one who died in a foreign land. Why is she so? He was still silently roasted that Xia Yuliang had returned to reality, and looked at him again with suspicious eyes. How did you find this place? Do you suspect that I'm with a woman surnamed Mei? Jingshen's anger was instantly ignited. Although Xia Yuliang's unfounded suspicion made him unhappy, what made him even angrier was the damn tacit understanding between the two. A glance or an unrelated sentence can accurately guess the other person's intention. Xia Yuliang was also angry. This man is the star of disaster in her life, as long as he is present, nothing good will happen. I won't mention it in my previous life. It's more than enough to make a TV series of dozens of episodes about unlucky things. Before meeting him in this life, everything she did was smooth sailing. As soon as he appeared, he would have nightmares even when he swam to the lake, and even a good gate could be smashed by someone. Hurry up and don't let me see you again in the future, she gritted her teeth and said. Jingshen was so angry that he burst into laughter. It's really despicable. The woman surnamed Mei came with a fierce presence, and the villa was clearly understaffed, so he couldn't help but come and take a look. To put it simply, I'm worried that the cool summer months will result in losses. As a result, not only did he not show mercy, but he also put on a cold and unpleasant face. He sneered, didn't you ask me how I found this place, and I don't want to know. Xia Yuliang was too lazy to entangle with him, so she turned around and left. Devil's pepper, your pickled pepper chicken feet look quite good, and there's also half a pool. The deep voice of the scene echoed through the secret passage, and Xia Yuliang felt a moment of annoyance as she quickened her pace. Pickled pepper Phoenix Claw, Banshee Mountain Villa. After all, they were careless. The customs and culture of Fenghua are similar to those of the previous Tang and Song dynasties, but its products are even more abundant. Many vegetables, fruits, and seasonings that were only introduced to China during the Ming and Qing dynasties can be found in Fenghua. For example, chili peppers have long been a common item on the dining tables of the people here. But people's level of making spicy dishes is limited, far from being as rich and colorful as in the previous life. Not long ago, she made pickled pepper chicken feet on a whim, but everyone enjoyed it, especially Xiao Xi and Xiao Yi, who kept pestering her all day to make it again. Unexpectedly, it was because of this broken chicken paw that Jingshen grabbed the handle. As for Banqi Villa, it's purely because she misses her father. Yanliang quickly returned to the entrance of the secret passage. She set aside the chaotic thoughts in her mind and reached out to the mechanism. Just as I was about to exert force, I heard a chaotic sound of footsteps on the other side of the wall. Is it Mei Xingyang chasing after me? She listened attentively. The people over there are very cooperative, not only immediately starting to speak, but also having a particularly loud voice. Moon sister, come out quickly. That stinky woman surnamed Mei has been beaten away by the young master. Xia Yuliang's face turned black. What kind of ghost day is today? The disaster star has arrived, the most disliked woman has arrived, and even the most annoying guy has come to join the fun. The guy on the other side of the wall obviously didn't find himself annoying. He darted in and out of the cool summer room, his voice louder than before. Mr. Mo, how could you trespass on the girl's boudoir? Chuanzhua followed closely behind him with a few maids, sweating profusely from anxiety. This little prince's face is so thick that it's hard to describe. Fortunately, this is not the capital city, otherwise the reputation of our own girl would have been ruined, and I'm afraid we could only become the little princess as he wished. Mo Xiaowang's name is Mo Qianli, and he is the only son of Princess Lekang of Yigua and Marquis Rongcheng. At the age of 8, he went to the capital of Fenghua to study and met Xia Yuliang, who had just entered the capital for the first time. Since then, he has often come to pester her, causing her endless annoyance. Normally, she would definitely be grateful to be hiding in the secret passage and not having to deal with this little demon star. But today don't forget there's a disaster star in the secret passage. What is the lesser of the two harms compared to the disaster star? Just as I made a decision, Chuanzhou spoke again. Little prince, the crown prince has just instructed you to wait for him in the main hall. She was worried that the secret passage would be discovered by Mo Qianli, so she had to move Prince Yi out. This move was indeed effective, and Mo Qianli immediately became honest. He pursed his lips unwillingly and said, "Okay, I'll go over and take a look first. When the summer moon cools down, I run away. Yi Jun, return." Compared to the demon star disaster star, this is a nuclear bomb. No one can bear the consequences of a nuclear bomb explosion. Love at first sight, why didn't Yanliang recognize it deeply? End of this chapter. Chapter 4. 3 generations of only spending not making rich. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. 3 generations of only spending not making rich. Xia Yuliang ran back to the previous fork in one breath. The black figure is still in its place. She awkwardly gripped the lantern in her hand. Today, I hit my face so fast and accurately. The death disaster star is simply haunted, his attitude is so bad, and his words are terrible. He still insists on not leaving. Jingshen chuckled and said, "Moon sister. You should be able to listen to such a cheesy nickname." The two of them have been fighting each other not once or twice, and Xia Yuliang has long been accustomed to his occasional attention to caution. She sneered and said, "What a big sour smell. You probably knocked over the vinegar jar, right?" To be honest, Jingshen's heart is a bit sour. Anyway, this woman is also her own wife. Although she was from a previous life, being chased by a little kid and calling her sister, which man can remain indifferent? But after years of fighting, he knew he couldn't lose his momentum in front of the cool summer moon noodles. Once she gains the upper hand, the situation will be difficult to reverse. "Che," he said nonchalantly, "I'm not that bored, but it's you. The feeling of slapping your face is not good, is it?" Jingshen's words reminded Xia Yuliang, and she suddenly realized that she was indeed quite bored. She hasn't had a verbal altercation with anyone for many years. To be precise, it's been many years since I had a fight with Jingshen. This kind of meaningless behavior that harms others and oneself is not worth wasting time and energy. Is it interesting that you always focus on things from your previous life when you pay attention to your past life? What exactly do you want to say? Jingshen frowned. It's good to settle the accounts when a person dies, but both of them carry memories from their past lives, so it's probably not so easy to settle this account. Xia Yueliang suddenly said such words, there must be some ulterior motives behind it. How resolute she was when she left just now, and how anxious she was when she returned, just like being chased by a dog. Is there anything wrong with that chubby kid? Xia Yueliang pondered for a while before looking up at him and saying, I have an opportunity to make money here. Do you want it? Making money. Jingshen almost couldn't hold his breath. We've known each other for so many years, what kind of person am I, don't you? The person I'm not sure about is you. Xia Yueliang interrupted him, you've all fallen into the trap of being a caretaker. Do you still consider yourself the wealthy third generation who used to only spend money without making a profit? Jingshen is almost furious. It's true that the third generation is wealthy, but he can also be self-sufficient, okay? This woman's mouth is truly poisonous and not worth her life, and it is impossible to refute. His reincarnation skills have all been used in his previous life, and his family background in this life is really not good. Although his parents don't expect him to support them, he can't really just let go. Nowadays, it's not possible to be a villa guard. It would be great if you could get some money to bring back to your parents. He deliberately cleared his throat and said, well. First, let's talk about what kind of opportunity it is. Xia Yueliang said, are you familiar with the road to Shuacheng? Well done, my family lives in Linqing, just a few mountains away from Shuacheng. That would be even better. I plan to go to Shuacheng and hire you as a guard, shouldn't it be a problem? Jingshen exclaimed curiously, Shuacheng is not as stable as Shuacheng. The cavalry of the kingdom of Yu often come to harass me. Are you sure you want to go? And don't you always say I'm a disaster star? When you meet me, there will definitely be no good thing. Of course, Xia Yueliang doesn't want to get too close to the disaster star. But the nuclear bomb was outside, so it was wiser for Jingshen to escort her to Shuacheng than before. She took a deep breath and said, you can say whether to go or not. Go, why not go? Mr. Xia has always been generous in his actions, and this trip can earn at least 1,000 or 800 yuan. Xia Yueliang gave him a glare. The lion spoke up loudly, even experts in the industry dare not ask for such a high price. Stop talking nonsense, hurry up and leave, she urged. Jingshen pointed to her clothes and said, you look too conspicuous. Besides, it's not convenient for the girl to go out. It's best to dress up. Am I so stupid? Of course I was already prepared. Xia Yueliang shook her sleeves and took the lead. Jingshen pursed his lips and followed her into the main passage from the other end of the small room. In less than 3/4 of an hour, the two of them walked out of the secret passage. This exit is located behind the villa, and although it is not as vast as the lake, the scenery is still excellent. The lush forests and clear streams winding down halfway up the mountain bring endless coolness and comfort to the hot summer days. Jingshen blocked the dazzling sunlight with his hand and praised Xia Yueliang, who had already changed her attire, saying, Mr. Xia's aesthetics have always been online. This villa. Xia Yueliang rolled her eyes and said, I wasn't there yet when we built this villa. Jingshen touched his nose and said, then this half-pool. How did you know my father's handwriting? Xia Yueliang's father in his previous life was a scholar engaged in classical literature research, with a gentle and introverted personality. After his marriage with his wife broke down, he went from being introverted to introverted, and his interactions with others were very limited except for his daughter. In Xia Yueliang's impression, Jingshen and his father have not met a few times in total, and their personalities are completely opposite, so they cannot be said to be together. How could he possibly know that his modern father had a small character? Jingshen shrugged and said, "We have a good relationship, but some people don't want to know." Xia Yu's cold heart began to ache faintly again. There are too many people and things she can't let go of, but unfortunately she has a weak heart. This feeling is really terrible. Jingshen has some regrets. He shouldn't have taken the initiative to mention his father. Law. This woman didn't treat him well, and when she was in a bad mood, looking at him would definitely be even more eye-catching. He tried to squeeze out a smile and said, "Mr. Xia, is a lady from a wealthy family like you who runs around without anyone taking care of her?" Being interrupted by him, Xia Yuoyang's inner gloom dissipated quite a bit. "My elders are all in the capital, and the villa is full of my people. Who do you think dares to interfere with me?" Jingshen raised his thumb and said, "Mr. Xia is mighty and domineering." Xia Yuoyang couldn't breathe well and said, "Don't be so good all day, Mr. Xia. It sounds awkward. You feel numb when it's cool, and you feel uncomfortable when it's cool, Mr. Xia. Let's call you a girl, and you're pretending to be a teenager. How about?" Jingshen stroked his chin and sneered, "Is it still called devil's pepper? Get lost." Xia Yuoyang threw the bundle in her hand towards his face and walked away without looking back. As it was getting late, the two finally walked out of the boundaries of Xiucheng. Having been pampered for more than a decade, although the cool summer moon is not as delicate as its appearance, it is really not feasible to travel long distances. Thinking of Mr. Xia, who walked briskly in high heels in her previous life, she found it unbelievable. Looking at the small inn in the distance, she felt her legs sore and swollen, her soles burning with pain, and she didn't want to move a step. Jing, who was following behind her, felt a lot of regret. Persimmon pepper Xiaomi pepper devil's pepper. He still hasn't figured out why the soft and sweet little persimmon has evolved step by step into the spicy devil's pepper. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Starting from too low and not concerned. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Starting from too low and not concerned. Golu, a sudden convulsion in his stomach pulled Jingshen back from his memories. Walking for a few hours is just a piece of cake for him, but his empty stomach is really unbearable. The inn ahead is not very large, but it means hot food and dishes, and he doesn't want to delay it for a second. Devil's pepper, it's almost dark. Let's stay at this small inn tonight. Jingshen took a step forward and grabbed Xia Yuoyang's arm. The two of them hardly spoke along the way, and this sudden touch was really uncomfortable. What are you doing? Xia Yuoyang struggled for a moment. I don't want to do anything, I just want to eat quickly. Jingshen added some force to his hand and pulled her forward. The small inn is located in a remote area, and business has never been very good. In addition, it is getting late today, and there are not a single diner. The shop assistant, who was dozing by the door, heard footsteps and shook his body before waking up. After seeing the person's description clearly, he greeted him with a smile on his face and said, "Are you two guests eating or staying?" According to the meaning of depth of field, of course, it means filling the stomach first before discussing anything else. But he knows Xia Yuoyang's temperament too well, and this woman cannot afford to eat without cleaning herself up. Arrange 2 rooms for us, just send hot water and food to the room. Please come inside, 2 of you. The shop assistant smiled even more and warmly welcomed them into the inn. These 2 guests are old and shabby, and he thought he had nothing to spare. Unexpectedly, as soon as he spoke, he demanded 2 rooms and even hot water on hot days. It was clear that he was a poor boy disguised as a wealthy child. As long as they serve with care, if there is a slight leak between their fingers, the hairpin that Xiaotsue is interested in will come to fruition. In addition to joy, the shop assistant did not forget the main matter. Could you please register your name, place of origin, and where you are going? This is the rule for staying in a hotel. Yan Jingshen didn't think much and casually said, "My surname is Jing, from Linqing. I am planning to go back to my hometown to visit my parents. A small rural shop like this, the so-called registration is just a passing act." The shop assistant randomly drew a few strokes on the ledger and happily took the two of them to the backyard. The small inn is a rural courtyard renovation, and most of the rooms are large bunks provided for those in financial difficulties. There are only 5 or 6 rooms that can truly be called guest rooms. The layout of the rooms is exactly the same, with 1 table, 1 chair and 1 bed. Although they are simple, they are clean. The hot water will be delivered soon. Xia Yuelyang washed her face, couldn't wait to take off her shoes and socks, and put her feet into a wooden basin. After dismissing the waiter who was delivering food, Yan Jingshen walked to the door of the opposite room with a large tray in hand. As soon as he lifted his foot, he realized that the door was not tightly closed. "This woman is really," he murmured softly, pushing the door open with his elbow. I saw Xia Yuelyang soaking her feet in the water, and her head was about to fall off the chair bit by bit. Yan Jingshen placed the tray on the table and quickly reached out to help her. Xia Yuelyang looked up at him with sleepy eyes and said, "What's wrong?" Yan Jingshen couldn't help but scold as he closed the door, "I didn't think you had such a big heart before. You didn't have any alertness when you went out." Xia Yuelyang knew she was at fault and didn't argue with him. She turned her head to look at the food on the table. 2 bowls of noodles and soup, 4 large mantu, plus a roast chicken and a plate of pickled pig elbows, and a small plate of dried tofu are the only vegetarian dishes. Perhaps she was hungry, but these greasy and heavily flavored dishes successfully aroused her craving. Quickly drying her feet and washing her hands, Xia Yuelyang picked up a spoon and took a sip of soup first. The warm and salty soup flowed down her throat into her stomach, and she felt like she had come back to life. Yan Jingshen doesn't care about so much. Xia Yuelyang's half bowl of noodles hasn't been eaten yet. His noodles and a mantu have disappeared, and he has eaten a lot of roast chicken and elbows. With food in their stomachs, the two of them partially recovered their spirits and physical strength, and it seemed that the other person was no longer as eye-catching as before. Especially in the cool summer months, there was even a desire to chat with Yan Jingshen. "Hello." She lightly kicked him. Yan Jingshen swallowed the food in his mouth and couldn't help but say, "Do I have a name?" "I know what your name is now. I just said it all, surname Jing, from Linqing. Do you have a surname?" Yan Jingshen didn't quite understand why she was concerned about this, just shook her head. "Are you really not surnamed Yan?" Xia Yuelyang asked again. "Are you having problems with your ears or your brain? Maybe if you still have your surname Xia, then I must still have your surname Yan." Xia Yuelyang poked the remaining noodles in the bowl with chopsticks. If she had known this, she wouldn't have wasted so much energy these years. Yan Jingshen's back suddenly snapped, "This art style is not right." He also lightly kicked her and said, "Devil pepper, what do you mean?" Xia Yuelyang looked at him like a monster and said, "You didn't just come here today. You don't even know the surname of the Emperor of Fenghua." "I don't care what his surname is." Yan Jingshen roared quite arrogantly, almost slapping the table. But he quickly discovered the key to the problem. Is it difficult for him to have the same surname? What a fantastic fantasy. Yan is not a big surname, how could he still get into that position? The cool summer moon makes me want to laugh. This guy has gone through a journey and lost his surname, even if he wants to impersonate a royal relative, he won't have a chance. Don't just say your surname, where's your first name? It's still the same as before. Oh, that's quite a coincidence. Xia Yuelyang couldn't help but laugh and almost lay on the table. Yan Jingshen almost cursed. What a coincidence. God knows he started playing tricks during his infancy to keep this name alive. He glanced askance at Xia Yuelyang and said, "Because the emperor's surname is Yan, you've been making a lot of trouble these years, haven't you?" Xia Yuliang couldn't laugh anymore. People who are too familiar with each other are easy to chat to death. Jingshen said again, aren't you just worried that I'll dress up as an emperor or something, so you won't have to do anything? Xia Yuliang didn't want to talk to him and reached out to bring herself a cup of tea. I want it too. Jingshen pushed his cup over. This time, Xia Yuliang did not refuse. Along the way, Jingshen took good care of her and did not want to owe her any favors. Pushing the teacup back in front of him, she sighed, your changes have been quite significant. In the past, current affairs, politics, and international affairs were always talked about, but now you don't even know the emperor's surname. Jingshen took a sip of his tea and said, the starting point of this life is too low. There is no leisure to care about these things. Xia Yuliang was almost amused by him again, but also curious. What kind of family is his so-called starting point too low? What does your family do? Jingshen looked at her and said, I said you must be laughing again. I'm full and laughing all day long, right? Our family used to run an escort agency. Haha. Xia Yuliang slapped her face for the second time today and burst into tears with a smile. Thank you, Bai Xiangxiang, for your monthly pass. When one is still in its infancy, so please support us. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Feeling Trapped. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Feeling Trapped. Opening an escort agency may not be funny, but in my previous life, Yan Jia worked in logistics and was considered a colleague. This time, Jingshen no longer mocked Xia Yuliang, but lowered the corner of his mouth and said, Devil Pepper, do you really think I'm a disaster star? Xia Yuliang threw a big white eye directly. Isn't this nonsense? Having experienced so many unfortunate things, is it that the disaster star still hasn't counted in his heart? The expression on the scene became increasingly desolate. The Jingjia escort agency has been passed down for 3 generations and its business has always been good. However, shortly before my birth, my family encountered a very big problem. All the property, including the house, has been used to offset debts. My mother even gave birth in a dilapidated temple. Xia Yuliang felt very conflicted in her heart. She was well aware that Jingshen was no longer her husband, and whether he was doing well or not had nothing to do with her. But when he talked about his experiences over the years, he couldn't help but want to keep listening. After roughly recounting the experiences of the Jing family, Jingshen rubbed his face vigorously. Sorry, I've been living with a mask for over 10 years, and my emotions were a bit out of control just now. This statement touched the heart of Xia Yuliang. Since her travels, her life has been relatively good, but she has never spoken to others with an open heart. Even when facing her father who loves her the most, she often has to be reserved. She was still sighing when Jingshen suddenly stood up and said, we still have to hurry tomorrow. You should rest early. He didn't even glance at Xia Yuliang again, hastily tidied up the dishes and left the guest room. The cool summer moon feels inexplicable. The brain of a disaster star is the only one with problems. No one forced him to complain about his family history, his reaction was so strong. Returning to the guest room, Jingshen took a deep breath. If we keep talking like this, he will definitely be unable to resist asking about his past life. For example, what kind of accident did the cool summer moon travel through? Also, without the care of his parents, how should Ollie, who is under 9 years old, survive? What if I know? He can't even go back to his door. Jingshen fell onto the bed and looked dejectedly at the top of the tent. For a moment, he felt like he had returned to the happiest days. He and Xia Yuliang always have endless words to say, unwilling to part ways for a minute. You're really full. Jingshen cursed softly, pulling up the blanket and covering his head. In the previous life, both of them couldn't survive anymore. What else do you think about in this life? Dong dong dong. A sudden knocking on the door woke Jingshen up from his dream. He tried hard to open his eyes and only then did he realize that it was already dawn. What's the rush? This woman is really... Jingshen put on his shoes and walked over to open the door. The person outside the door is not Yanliang, but the waiter from yesterday's famous shop. He looked at Jingshen with a smile on his face, completely devoid of yesterday's enthusiasm. Jingshen raised his eyebrows and said, "What's up with you? Could you please settle the bill, sir? It's also a rule in your store to drive out customers early in the morning." The shop assistant pointed across and said, "You have to ask that person about this." Jingshen was too lazy to entangle with him and walked towards the opposite guest room. The shopkeeper spat lightly. Two poor ghosts pretending to be wealthy have wasted so much of his time. The door to the guest room was open, and within a few steps, Jingshen saw the awkward expression of Yanliang. "What's going on?" He walked in quickly. "Have you brought any money?" Yanliang whispered. You didn't bring any money." Jingshen almost spewed out a mouthful of old blood. The boss asked the laborer to pay for the house, really? How does he feel like he's going to be scammed for this trip? He gestured at the cool summer moon a few times, then turned around and asked the shopkeeper following behind, "How much is it in total?" "The total cost of the 2 rooms is 300 won. Last night's meal cost 200 won, and there was also money for the lamp oil." "What are you saying? The lamp oil still needs money?" Jingshen was almost furious. The shop assistant glanced at Yanliang, who was blocked by him, and shouted at the top of her throat, "The lamp oil in this room was just filled yesterday, and there was not a drop left this morning." Jingshen was annoyed by his argument and took out a piece of broken silver from his arms, throwing it on the table. "This silver is 6 coins and there is still surplus. The lamp oil I bought can light up this room." After speaking, he grabbed Yanliang's wrist and said, "Let's go." The two of them rushed along, and Yanliang, who was a bit short, couldn't keep up with their footsteps and stumbled, almost falling. Until the small and disappeared, Jingshen finally let go and said, "What are you up to?" "I was in a hurry when I left the wallet containing silver," Yanliang explained. "Are you treating me like a fool?" Jingshen laughed angrily again. The two have been married for 10 years, and their habits are clear to each other. This woman is always meticulous in her work. Even though she has a secretary and assistant around her and lives in an era where payment can be made by swiping her phone or face, she always carries a certain amount of cash with her. In ancient times, there were many inconveniences in life, and would she forget to bring money when traveling far away? Yanliang gritted her teeth and said, I forgot to bring the silver." "Bring it." Jingshen reached out his hand. "What are you taking?" Yanliang couldn't see his appearance and pretended not to understand. "Whether it's silver or gold, you have to take some out. With Shuacheng so far away, hiring cars, horses, food, and accommodation, which one doesn't cost money? We take a shortcut and don't need to hire a car or horse. We can eat whatever we have along the way and make do with it anywhere for the night." "Are you sure?" Jingshen didn't mean to underestimate Yanliang, but he saw her performance yesterday. The flat road is so difficult to walk, let alone the mountain road. Yanliang explained, "I didn't get used to walking long on the first day, but it will get better later." Jingshen chuckled and said, "Anyway, you're just taking care of me." If possible, Yanliang really wants to throw the small bundle of golden leaves that she wore close to her body onto this beaten face. Can you think of Yi Jun returning that nuclear bomb? Fenghua is rich and prosperous, but almost all that circulates on the market are copper coins and scattered silver. Once she takes out the golden leaf, her whereabouts will soon be exposed. Although Yi Junhui may not spend so much energy chasing after her, it's better to do less than to do more. She doesn't want to cause trouble. In any case, I will never let you suffer a loss. No matter how much money you spend, I will pay you back 10 times or 100 times when I arrive at Shuacheng. Wait a minute. Yan Jingshen raised his hand and blocked her way. What else are you dissatisfied with? Yan Jingshen looked into her eyes and said in a deep voice, I remember you couldn't sleep when there was a little light before. Why didn't you turn off the light last night? People always change. I like to sleep with the light on right now, can you manage it? Yes, I can't control it. I only know that some people forget to take courage when traveling. Xia Yuliang said lightly, you're right. I did leave my courage in my previous life. I'm just a coward now, can I go now? Yan Jingshen felt flustered in his heart, but he didn't know what else to say. He tightened his burden on his back and took big steps forward. Thank you, Zilin Hanyu, for your kind reward. Passing by, please help collect it. More exciting scenes are coming, end of this chapter. In chapter 7, the second young man speaks harshly. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In chapter 7, the second young man speaks harshly. The two of them hurried on and finally entered the border of Linqing 10 days later. Unlike the bustling city of Xiucheng, this area has vast mountains and dense forests, with few people seen throughout the day. After enduring the first few days, Xia Yuoyang's physical fitness has greatly improved and her footsteps have become much more agile. Seeing that she was in good spirits and had a good complexion, Yan Jingshen felt that his wallet was becoming increasingly dry. Devil's Pepper, although this place is already under the jurisdiction of Linqing, it is still 3 or 4 days away from Shuacheng. I only have a few dozen copper coins left, and from tonight on, we can't even afford to stay at a rural inn. If you don't live, then don't live. Anyway, the weather isn't cold. Xia Yuliang smiled at him and said, I didn't expect you to be quite wealthy. You managed to last for 10 days. You overthink, more than half of this money belongs to my 2 junior brothers. Do you still have a junior brother? When you were at the villa that day, you saw one with a smiling eyebrow and eyes, and another with a slightly dark skin. Xia Yuliang nodded, she remembered both of them. According to your style of conduct, they were 100% dismissed, Yan Jingshen said confidently. I'm not as vicious as you think. I didn't do a day's work, and everyone received a severance pay of 10 taels of silver. The whole Fenghua couldn't find a second one either. 10 taels. Yan Jingshen said with a sour expression, if I had known earlier, I might as well have stayed at the villa. It was hasty. Xia Yuliang was about to mock him a few times when a shout came from behind. The front one, give way to the side. The two of them looked back together and saw a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes riding a big flower donkey, following them leisurely. Yan Jingshen and Xia Yuliang looked at each other. This guy is really interesting. They didn't take the official road, and the road wasn't too wide, but it was still more than enough for an ordinary carriage to pass by. And they're not walking in the middle of the road, just a donkey. Is it necessary to make such a big noise? The boy saw that they didn't intend to give way and shook the reins to accelerate and overtake. Both of them laughed at the same time. Surprisingly, there are also such second-year teenagers in this era. Yan Jingshen smiled and said, if we have 10 taels of silver in our hands, we can also get 2 donkeys to ride on. Xia Yuliang disapproved and said, what's so easy to ride on a donkey? It's far behind a horse. Do you think the young master's donkey is only worth 5 taels of silver? The second young man suddenly turned back and glared angrily at Yan Jingshen, then shouted to Xia Yuliang, and you, my donkey is 100 times stronger than a horse. The smile on Xia Yuliang's face is even stronger. She and Yan Jingshen are not really only in their teens. In the eyes of adults, this is just a child getting angry, so there is really no need to take it seriously. Yan Jingshen's thoughts are similar to hers. As a big man, it would be too foolish for him to argue with a little kid. The middle school boy muttered to himself, so it's 2 mute people. He turned the direction and accelerated again to run forward. Xia Yuliang smiled and bent down. Oh my God, where did this live treasure come from? Jingshen couldn't laugh anymore. This young man is somewhat abnormal, but his martial arts are obviously very good. Is there any reason why he suddenly appeared in such a remote place? Devil's pepper, I remember there was a tea house ahead, let's go have a bowl of tea. There is no objection to the cool summer moon. The weather is so hot, it is necessary to replenish water in a timely manner. This road has been traversed by Jingshen several times before, so his words are naturally credible. After walking about a mile, there was indeed a rudimentary small tea house on the roadside. 7 or 8 tables, 5 or 6 tea guests, each with a copper plate tea tube, are truly affordable and of good quality. The fragrance of tea had already penetrated their nostrils, but they couldn't move their feet. There are no 2 reasons, and the second-grade boy is also drinking tea here. The owner of the tea house, unaware of the truth, warmly welcomed him and said, "2 guests, please sit down and rest for a moment, and drink some tea to quench your thirst." The 2 of them picked the table closest to the side and sat down. The second-year junior changed his previous noise and drank tea quietly without even looking at them. The other tea guests were chatting and laughing, occasionally chatting with them. Half a bowl of tea had not been finished when suddenly a commotion broke out outside the tea shed. 6 carriages and a dozen servants almost filled the empty space. The owner of the tea house hurriedly went to greet him. A bearded man dressed in a brocade robe jumped out of the carriage and glanced at him with disdain on his face. "Who, butler? There's only one tea house nearby. You can make do with moistening your throat," the servant beside him whispered. Who snorted coldly and said, "How can we drink the tea in this place? Go and soak our good tea leaves. And these people?" He pointed to the tea guests and said to the owner of the tea house, "All of them have been driven away. They have startled our wife and young master, and no one can afford it." The owner of the tea house blushed with anger and said, "Master, there's no reason to drive out guests." Manager who snorted. "Give the young master another try." The second young man patted the table and stood up. Xia Yueliang glanced at Jingshen. What if this kid is not a match for such a large group of men? Jingshen leaned in her ear and said, "Do you want me to help?" The summer moon cools and pouts. Does the disaster star think they have 3 heads and 6 arms? Still helping, don't get yourself involved. Jingshen smiled deeply. The useless wine bags and rice bags in this group cannot be the opponent of the second-grade youth. Where can I need his help? He picked up the cool summer moon and hid behind the tea shed with other tea guests. Who, the butler, squinted his eyes and looked at the second young man in the middle school. "Stinky kid, you're looking for death." As soon as he finished speaking, a thick porcelain tea bowl flew straight towards his forehead. Ouch! The big tea bowl fell to the ground and broke into several pieces. "What are you still doing? Give it all to me." Who, the butler, covered his head and shouted loudly. More than 10 servants rushed towards the middle school boy together. The second-year young man remained calm and used only a dozen moves to beat up a group of big men, causing them to cry and flee around. Who, the butler, didn't care about his head anymore, so Sa Yazi ran into the forest. The coachmen were all discerning and had already driven the carriage without a trace. The second-year junior didn't chase after him and grabbed the servant closest to him. The servant's legs trembled like chaff. "Little young master, I am just a laborer. Doing odd jobs." The second-year junior sneered, "Don't be nervous. Your dog's fate doesn't appeal to me yet. I just need to answer a few questions truthfully and let you go. Don't hesitate to ask, young master. I dare not lie. What's going on with you big family?" The villain is a servant of the Willow family in Wangcheng. He fled with the master's family only because there were bandits in the city. Is there a banditry in Wangcheng? Little people dare not speak nonsense. "You go," said the second young man as he released his hand. The servant's leg softened and he knelt on the ground. The second-year junior walked out of the tea house and jumped onto the donkey's back. Go back and tell your Mr. Liu, my surname is Lin, my name is Feng, and my character is Yushu. Don't find the wrong person when seeking revenge. The jade tree faces the wind. The name of Hao Zhong'er. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Old Auntie Needs Needles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. The Old Auntie Needs Needles. A jade tree in the wind. Xia Yuliang once again smiled and bent over. She couldn't remember how many years she hadn't been able to smile so happily. Even for this pleasure, she would definitely remember this second-year junior named Lin Feng. Follow me. Jingshen pulled her to a secluded place. Seeing his expression somewhat solemn, Xia Yuliang said strangely, "What's wrong with you?" Jingshen broke a branch and quickly drew on the soft soil. Is this a map? Xia Yu realized what he was drawing after being cool for a long time. Jingshen pointed a tree branch at the bottom of the map and said, "This is Wangqing, the northeast is Linqing, and further up is Shuacheng. If you were a bandit, which city would you choose to loot?" Xia Yuliang glanced at him. This guy has been away from the army for many years, and his habits have not changed at all. Whenever he encounters something, it feels like he's going to war. She has never been a soldier or a bandit, so she has no experience in such things, right? It's not really asking you to become a bandit, it's just a matter of opinion. Xia Yuliang thought for a moment and said, to the west of Shuacheng is Yuguoqing City, and to the north is Yasu City. Heavy troops are stationed in all three places. Bandits are also afraid of death and will never choose Shuacheng. As for Linqing and Wangqing, I am completely unclear about the situation in these two places, so I won't say anything about them. Jingshen nodded in approval and said, "It's already great that you can think of this. The three cities are all adjacent to the kingdom of Yu. The border of Linqing is the turbulent Fujiang River, while the border of Wangqing is the Grand Canyon, which is several thousand meters deep. Because of this, the two places have almost never been directly invaded by the state of Yu. Among them, Linqing has a relatively flat terrain and is relatively prosperous. The steep slopes and barren land of Wangqing Mountain make it the most impoverished place in this area. Of course, bandits should go for money." Xia Yuliang stroked her chin and said, "Do you suspect that the person just lied, or do you suspect that those bandits have a problem?" "That person has no need to lie at all, I just feel that those bandits are not real bandits at all." "It's not bandits, so what is their purpose in attacking Wangqing?" "I don't know about that. But do you see the behavior of those people just now, like they came out to escape after being attacked by bandits?" In Xia Yuliang's life, she couldn't bear to see people like Hu Butler who bully the good and fear the evil. She said coldly, "In my opinion, they are the bandits." Jingshen said, "There are many people like this, but now that you have a prestigious status, you can't come into contact with them." "Hello." Xia Yuliang pushed him, "You've been analyzing for so long, shouldn't you be worried about your parents?" Jingshen said honestly, "Linqing and Wangqing are separated by a river. Do you think I can stop worrying? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and go back and take a look. I'll escort you to Shuacheng first. If it delays your business, it won't be good. Although my matter is important, it's not urgent. If it doesn't matter a few days later, I'll go to your house first." Jingshen felt a warm surge in his heart. Although the little persimmon has become a devil's pepper, its essence has not changed at all, and it is still a warm-hearted girl. "Okay, then let's go to Linqing first. It's just that it's still far from the city, so we'll have to camp overnight. Hurry up and try to walk as much as possible before it gets dark." The two of them quickened their steps and arrived at a mountain depression in the evening. "Devil's Pepper, this place is quite windy and suitable for rest. Let's rest here tonight. You are responsible for lighting the fire, and I will go nearby to catch some wild animals and check if there is any water." As he spoke, Jingshen took out a dagger from his sleeve and said, "Take this and shout out loud if you encounter anything. I won't go too far." Xia Yuliang took the dagger and said, "Go, come back soon." In the previous life, Xia Yuliang achieved success in his career, but other things did not delay him. For example, cooking is a skill that she forced herself to master when she was in junior high school. There are often people camping in this mountain valley, and there are leftover branches and firewood everywhere. She quickly lit a pile of fire. It's still summer now, and it's too hot next to the fire. In the cool summer, I found a cool place to sit down and rest. For 13 years, she has lived in either Xiucheng or Jingshen, either in leisure and comfort, or in intrigue and intrigue. Leisure and comfort make one lazy, while intrigue and intrigue make one restless. She used to think that the former was the life she liked, and even if she spent her whole life at Banqi Villa, there was nothing wrong with it. But these 10 days of hard work have made her rediscover herself. Opening her mouth and reaching out for food cannot bring her happiness. Compared to the outcome, what she enjoys the most is still the process of hard work and struggle. It seems that she needs to take action now. The sky gradually darkened, and the depth of the field returned. He has gained a lot. Besides 2 pheasants and a wild rabbit, there are actually more than 10 pairs. Oh, I was just thinking about this. Xia Yuliang approached with a smile, picked up a pear, wiped it, and took a bite. Her little face furrowed up and said, "What's this? It's so sour and astringent." Jingshen looked amused and said, "Isn't it not yet the season of maturity? I'll make you crave it." Speaking as if you're not greedy. Xia Yuliang muttered, suddenly unable to continue. Due to the angle issue, she didn't actually see 2 people standing behind Jingshen just now. One is an old woman with gray hair and a hunched figure, and the other is a boy in tattered clothes. Jingshen blocked her line of sight and said, "Don't look, go get some food first." Xia Yuliang's curiosity was aroused, and she refused to listen to him. She bypassed Jingshen and walked up to the 2 of them. The old woman quickly blessed her body, but the young man desperately hid behind her, wishing he could shrink his head into his collar. The cool summer moon is extremely awkward. It turned out that the boy's pants were somehow torn apart, not only his thighs but also his buttocks, unable to be fully covered. She turned around and ran towards the fire. "Auntie is going to have needle holes tonight." Jingshen suppressed his smile and took steps to follow him. Xia Yuliang gave him a fierce look and said, "If you didn't say it earlier, it would have killed someone." Jingshen argued, "I said don't look, are you not listening?" Xia Yuliang gritted her teeth and said, "There is still a piece of clothing in the package. Take it and cover it for him." Jingshen responded with a sound, put down the pheasant and wild rabbit in his hand, and opened his bag. He quickly turned back and handed the clothes to the old woman. "Auntie, I'll give this garment to my little brother." The old woman said awkwardly, "How does this make?" "It's not a big deal, it's not a good dress." Jingshen stuffed the dress into her hand. "Thank you very much, young master." The old woman was extremely grateful and carefully wrapped her clothes around the young man's waist. The young man bowed and still refused to speak. Jingshen smiled and said, "Let's take a break first and have dinner together later." The old woman saw him so kind, and her courage increased a lot. "Young master, I'll go pack up those wild animals." "Thank you, Bai Xiang, for your monthly pass. Thank you for your collection, recommendation, and investment. Let's work together." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Friends of Women, Sleeping Soundly. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Friends of Women, Sleeping Soundly. Jingshen understood that the old woman was unwilling to eat idle food and it was not easy to refuse. "Thank you, madam," he smiled. The old woman nodded and reminded the boy a few more words before slowly walking to the fire. "Miss, there's a small stream over there in the forest. I'll go clean up these wild animals." Xia Yuliang was a bit surprised and said, Auntie, can you tell that I am a woman? The girl's attire was excellent, but your reaction just now revealed a flaw. The old woman smiled and drew a burning firewood from the fire, picked up the pheasant and wild rabbit, and walked into the forest. Xia Yuliang turned her head and saw the young man curled up under a big tree in the distance, as if he had been asleep for a long time. She felt a bit uneasy in her heart and waved at Jingshen. What's wrong? Jingshen walked over and sat beside her. Where did you meet them? Xia Yuliang asked in a low voice. What do you think is inappropriate in this forest? I can't say for sure, it just feels like this young man has been stimulated. And the old woman, her words and actions are not like ordinary village women. Jingshen raised his thumb and said, You truly deserve to be Mr. Xia. You have a clear eye for people. These two are a pair of grandparents and grandsons. They used to come from a relatively wealthy family, but later they ran away from their hometown in adversity. He spoke in great detail, even including the very private matter of the old woman's son being addicted to gambling, his daughter-in-law hanging in anger, and how the grandparents and grandchildren were being pursued for debt. Xia Yuliang also raised her thumb and said, I truly deserve to be a friend of women. People I don't know can talk so thoroughly. Jingshen exploded and said, Who's the friend of women? Please explain it to me clearly. Are middle-aged and elderly women not women anymore? Xia Yuliang couldn't help but laugh. Jingshen was a wealthy third generation in his previous life, but he had no interest in the family business. After graduating from high school, he took the initiative to take the military academy exam. Perhaps it is precisely this experience that has reduced the arrogance of wealthy children and made his personality more sunny, especially appealing to his elders. Especially those old ladies, they wish they could treat him like their own grandson and tell him everything. In the years when the two had a good relationship, she often used the term, friend of women, to joke with him. Nowadays, it is truly lamentable that things have changed and people have changed. Xia Yuliang waved her hand and said, all right, just treat me like I'm talking nonsense. I won't do it again in the future. Jingshen's lips moved, but he couldn't utter the words that were already on his lips. In fact, he never really cared about her jokes. It used to be, it is now, and in the future. I'm afraid he won't have a chance. Xia Yuliang said in a lower voice, we must have a heart of harm and a heart of defense. These two may seem quite honest, but we still need to be careful. Jingshen touched his nose and said, I'm so poor that even if they want to calculate, they won't come to me. Furthermore, I think the people here are much more sincere than modern people. I have to listen to this matter. After dinner, you can go to bed first. I will be responsible for the first half of the night, and you can switch to me in the second half of the night. Okay, we'll all listen to you, but the order needs to be changed. You go to bed first. Xia Yuliang knew he wanted to sleep a little longer, so she stopped insisting. The old woman came back soon. Despite her advanced age, she is very agile in her actions, and both the pheasant and the hare are kept very clean. Xia Yuliang takes out the mantou he bought in the inn in the morning from his bundle and plans to bake it for eating. The three of them worked together and quickly made a dinner that was not very sumptuous, but also full of color, aroma, and flavor. The boy still didn't speak, and refused to get too close to them. He grabbed two mantou and returned to the old tree. The oily and fragrant roasted chicken and rabbit meat had no attraction to him at all. The old woman explained awkwardly, my grandson was not like this before. I haven't had enough food for several months. When I saw white flour mantou, I didn't care about anything. Jingshen tore off a chicken leg and said, my aunt sent this to my little brother. How can I eat only mantou? The old woman quickly shook her head and said, young master, don't always worry about us. You and the girl should eat quickly. Like the young man, she grabbed a mantou and went under the tree. She never came back. Yan Jingshen and Xia Yuelyang looked at each other helplessly, with so stubborn two people beside them, even the barbecue was not as fragrant as before. They shared a roast chicken and 2 mantou and could not eat any more. Yan Jingshen cleared an open space under another big tree and spread his outer clothes on the ground. Go to bed quickly, I'll call you when time comes. Xia Yuelyang said, you can also watch the rest of the barbecue and mantou. Tomorrow you will have breakfast. Are you annoyed? Yan Jingshen leaned against the tree and didn't want to talk to her anymore. Xia Yuelyang used the bundle as a pillow and gently lay down. She closed her eyes, but didn't think she could really fall asleep tonight. That day, she told Yan Jingshen that if she had the courage to stay in her previous life, it was not anger, but the truth. A shopping mall is like a battlefield, and one of the important reasons why she is able to do so much business is her courage. After having a nightmare-like experience, Xia Yuelyang was really scared. In the first few years of traveling to Fengguo, she didn't dare to turn off the lights or go to dark places while sleeping. Fortunately, at that time, I was young and did not arouse anyone's suspicion. It wasn't until recent years that the situation had improved a bit, so she dared to walk the secret passage alone. However, in a strange place, she had an old habit of having to keep the light on to fall asleep. The lamp oil money that the waiter begged for the first day of staying at the inn was spent in this way. Sleeping in this wilderness tonight, it's hard and uncomfortable at all. It's strange to be able to sleep. However, this time she was mistaken. In less than 15 minutes, she let out a uniform breathing sound. Yan Jingshen looked down at her peaceful sleeping face and couldn't help feeling a little sad. After leaving Banqi Villa, they stayed at the inn for 10 days, and Xia Yuelyang slept with the lights on all the time. Today, camping in this mountain valley, apart from the faint starlight and distant fire, there was no light around her, but she slept so soundly. Perhaps it was his self-indulgence, but he felt that it was all because he was by her side, giving her a sense of security. Devil's pepper, what exactly did she experience? Yan Jingshen joined the military in his previous life and has been practicing martial arts since childhood. He hasn't had any problem sleeping for a few days. So he didn't plan to wake Xia Yuelyang up from the beginning, just wanted her to rest peacefully. However, this time he was also mistaken. The sky is bright and the summer moon is cool and awake. She struggled to sit up, feeling sore all over her body. Looking around, her anger suddenly rose. Hey, don't sleep. She pushed Yan Jingshen, who was sleeping soundly against the big tree, hard. What's wrong? Yan Jingshen was startled awake. Dear friends, don't underestimate this old woman. She is the key to opening the door of the male protagonist's destiny. As for what material the key is made of, the author will sell it to you first. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Chaos, immediately return to Beijing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Chaos, immediately return to Beijing. Look at it yourself. Xia Yuelyang grabbed Yan Jingshen's collar and let out a roar. Yan Jingshen stood up with the help of force and quickly scanned around. The mountain valley was empty, not only the old woman and young man, but also the leftover food from last night. Is this what you mean by sincerity? The cool summer moon only felt a moment of fear afterwards. Mantou and barbecue are not worth mentioning, but what if people want their lives? The matter has already been like this, what's the use of making such a fuss? Yan Jingshen brushed her hand away and walked towards the already burned-out fire. Xia Yuelyang is really suffocating. The journey went very smoothly, and she secretly felt grateful that this guy's disaster star physique had weakened its influence on her. I didn't expect trouble to wait here. Yan Jingshen carefully examined it, but did not find any valuable clues. His master is a strange talent, and his martial arts are not top-notch, but he is very proficient in various miscellaneous skills. After 10 years of apprenticeship, he not only learned martial arts, but also learned many skills from his master. He will never be less guarded than the cool summer moon, and the so-called sincerity is just talk. He checked the ingredients processed by the old woman's hands and did not tamper with them. In the first half of the night, the grandparents and grandchildren slept very peacefully, so he squinted for a while. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. Jingshen pinched his purse, and the copper plate was still there. Why did they leave without saying goodbye when they didn't seek wealth or harm their lives? What's even more puzzling is why they took all the barbecue when they didn't eat it. Xia Yuelyang is also thinking about this issue. Her golden leaves were not stolen. What exactly did the old woman and the boy want? Did you find anything? She walked over and asked. Forget it, it's just some barbecue. Let's go. The anger of Xia Yuelyang was once again arched. The various grievances accumulated in past and present lives gushed out. What I care about is that bit of barbecue. You're always like this, you believe what others say, my words just go unnoticed. Jingshen was stimulated by these words. I don't believe you. Why don't you ask yourself, who have you ever believed in this world? Xia Yuelyang clenched her fist. Yan's depth of field reflex was average, and he immediately made a defensive move. Do you want to fight again? Speaking of this matter, it's really hard to say in a single word. The captain of the Special Forces Squadron who thinks of him grandly has never won a fight with his wife, and he only gets beaten up every time. Xia Yuelyang neither answered nor acted, suddenly turning around. Where are you going? Jingshen hesitated slightly and took a step, intending to chase after him. Go to the bathroom. Xia Yu walked into the forest without looking back. Jingshen paused, his mouth slightly raised. Devil's Pepper became a lady from an ancient family, but her temper was somewhat restrained. In the past, she would never have easily let go. He searched for a big tree nearby and leaned against its trunk. Confirming that Yan Shinjing could no longer see her, Xia Yuelyang hurriedly walked into the depths of the dense forest. Girl, a slender man cleared the grass and called out softly. Huzi, how did you find this place? Xia Yuelyang walked over. Huzi looked a little anxious and said, Miss, there's something wrong with the young general. Xia Yuelyang was taken aback and said, Are you talking about Big Brother? The young general referred to by Huzi is her elder brother Xia Malang. The Xia family has been a civil servant for generations, and they gave birth to Xia Huaimin, the eldest son of Grand Tutor Xia, who was also Xia Malang's father. From a young age, they only enjoyed dancing with knives and guns. Despite repeated obstacles, Xia Taisher was unable to succeed and could only fulfill his eldest son, allowing him to bow down to Yang Sui, the famous general of Fenghua. After reaching adulthood, Xia Huaimin married Yang Sui's daughter and had a pair of children. Now the defending general of Shuacheng is Xia Huaimin. Xia Malang joined the army with his father before the age of 15, and has been there for 4 years now. In recent years, the state of Yu has been plagued by disasters, causing significant damage to its national strength, and the number of attacks on Fenghua has significantly decreased. Moreover, Xia Yuelyang has not heard of the attack on Shuacheng recently. Xia Murang is staying well in the military camp, what can happen? Huzi said, the young master was injured in Wangcheng. Are you talking about those bandits? Xia Yuelyang finally understood what was going on in Wangcheng. So the girl already knows. Where did Big Brother get injured? Both legs were severely injured, fortunately there was no concern for his life. The general has sent someone to escort him back to the capital. Xia Yuelyang breathed a slight sigh of relief. She only went to the capital for the first time when she was 6 years old, and her relationship with Xia Murang was not deep. But he is the eldest grandson of the Xia family and also her own relative, and she hopes he can be safe no matter what. Do you know why Big Brother is in Wangcheng? I'm not sure about that anymore. So how did you know I was here? After the girl left the villa, Sister Chuanzhua flew pigeons to deliver the news to Brother Feng. We were only sent out after Sister Chuanzhua. She said that since the girl has given up her previous plan, she will definitely choose to take the rare mountain road and let us secretly protect you. It's all due to our lack of skills. We haven't been able to find the girl for so many days, but instead we've encountered Brother Feng. Although Huzi's words were long but not chaotic, Xia Yueliang still frowned after hearing them. Chuanzhua didn't know that she had met Yan Jingshen in the secret passage. She couldn't possibly have known that Yi Jun had returned to Banqi Villa. So, how did she infer that she would choose a rarely traveled mountain road? This must be Yi Jun's idea. That guy is too smart. It seems difficult to fight him, miss. The matter hasn't been finished yet, Huzi whispered. Then hurry up and say it. Evidence of collusion with the state of Yu was found in Ji Zhongqing's mansion, and he was imprisoned. Yugua's meticulous work. Who is it? In the cool summer, I only feel a headache. I haven't encountered so many things in more than a decade, and now it's just a bunch of them, one by one amazing. Huzi hurriedly said, Gu Yanliang. This name did not surprise Xia Yueliang too much, but it involved too many people and things. If not handled properly, not only the Ji family, but also the Xia family should not be left clean. Huzi, let's go back to Beijing immediately. The person who is with the girl. He is the temporary guard I hired. Just explain the situation to him clearly. But Brother Feng is probably already with him. When the summer moon cools down, I run away. She knows Feng Qi too well. That guy has extremely high martial arts skills and always unconditionally favors himself. He must have seen the scene of the argument just now. If you slow down one step, the depth of field will probably suffer. Huzi jumped out of the grass and caught up with her footsteps. The two of them returned to the mountain valley and saw Yan Jingshen lying straight on the ground, surrounded by Feng Qi and another young man named Qinju. The two of them heard footsteps and greeted each other. Mississippi. Brother Feng, what have you done to him? Xia Yueliang quickly asked. No problem, I just passed out and can wake up in at most half an hour. Feng Qi rarely saw her so worried about someone, and couldn't help but add, where did the girl find such a powerful kid? I'm almost not his match. End of this chapter.